Welcome, everyone. This is One Sage's View podcast. I'm Sarrah Christensen, your host, and today is February 28th, 2023. Today, we are looking at Pluto in Aquarius, and I'm excited for our guest. I'll announce him in just a minute. The intent of the One Sage's View podcast is to share astrology and what it brings to all of us in our life and our human experience and our evolution as a collective while we're here on Earth. Welcome to exploring all things astrology, archetypes, life experiences, reflections, and where we derive meaning in the symbolism as we evolve through new opportunities that are presented for us for growth. Today, my guest is Simon Vorster. I hope I said that correctly. So welcome, Simon.
Thanks very much. And yes, you did.
So Simon is a specialist in the evolutionary astrology paradigm. He is a consultant and educator, and his teachings are inspired by renowned figures such as Jeffrey Wolf Green and Carl Jung and Dane Rudhyar. As a conscious partner and parent, Simon draws inspiration from his personal life to help people navigate their emotional experiences and connect with their soul's purpose. Through his work, he seeks to support and empower individuals in processing their emotional experiences. Simon also runs an online astrology school and an EA community, sharing his knowledge and insights on multiple social platforms alongside his partner. So welcome, Simon. I'm glad to have you today on the podcast. And we're going to dive into Pluto in Aquarius. This is one of the biggest things happening this year. And truly, I'm going to outline the dates so we have that kind of like for us to understand. There's so many dates of Pluto's ingress into Aquarius. So 2023, but there's a lot going on in 2024. So we're going to focus probably a lot on 23 and then build into maybe what that may look like over the 20 years of Aquarius.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the dates first. So Pluto makes its ingress into Aquarius on March 23rd of this year, 2023. And then it will station retrograde May 1st, and that's at 0 degrees 22 minutes of Aquarius. And then it will re-enter Capricorn in June 11th, 2023. And then it stations direct later in the year around October 11th from that retrograde. And that will be at 27 degrees 53 minutes of Capricorn. And then it'll re-enter Aquarius next January 21st of 2024. And then it stations retrograde again May 2nd of 2024. And that's at 2 degrees and 6 minutes. And then it re-enters Capricorn again on September 2nd in that retrograde cycle of 2024. And then it stations direct October 12th of 2024 at 29 degrees 38 minutes of Capricorn, and then it re-enters Aquarius again November 19th, 2024. So we have this kind of sweep from March 23 when it first enters, and I always look at the ingress chart. It's so important for me, but and then it sweeps in and out kind of in those early degrees all the way through November of next year, November 19th of next year.
Yeah.
So what I think there's also other important planetary movements and transits that we are aware of, like Saturn moving into Pisces will flavor this because it's a co-ruler of Aquarius, even though we look at Uranus as well in the evolutionary astrology. I'm a evolutionary astrology from Stephen Forrest's perspective. Even though I studied all of the stuff that Jeffrey Wolf Green put out, I have all of his DVDs and his books, all of them. And but I went towards Stephen because of his AP program, and that helped me. But very similar and some of the things that they've created in the EA community, right?
Yeah.
So as we're diving in, I kind of had a big theme for Simon and us to kind of talk about today, and it's about the consciousness that we as a collective, and then what that means for collective, but also then maybe what that might mean for us individually, because we're all participating. And we all look at Capricorn. Capricorn's actually a feminine sign, so I kind of think of that. That's feminine, and then into the yang.
Yeah.
So yin and yang, kind of bouncing back and forth, especially these first 2 years of this ingress, and yang being that for the fixed air of Aquarius. So I think there's a quality in there that we could highlight a little bit in this exchange, what that might mean and what that might look like. There's, a lot of things we want to take a look at. So I want to start off with Simon Dummy. I've enjoyed a lot of your work, Simon. I follow your videos. I follow your website. I think I'm on your Patreon as well. And it's fun to see what you're producing. And I want to share it with the world, that whoever listens, I have a small audience of where I am in the Pacific Northwest, though I do have clients around the globe, some in Norway, some in England, some in Romania, but a primary in the US and Canada is where my clients are and my audience. But I'm curious about, I want to kind of bring it forward, like how you look at Pluto and Aquarius kind of just in 23, 24, because then we're going to span out further over 20 years.
Yeah.
And I would like to invite you back next year for sure as we keep going on this thing. But what do you think about just this movement between 23 and 24, because it's going back and forth, kind of what you think about that? I'd be very curious about that.
I mean, I'm very attuned. Well, I have to be very attuned to this transit of Pluto going out of a Capricorn and going to Aquarius, because it's actually my Pluto square. So my Pluto sits at 29 degrees Libra. So it's literally like squaring that. It's throughout this whole time it's squaring my Pluto. So I am I'm becoming very aware of the Pluto work, and especially around, what are the dynamics that are transforming in me. So to answer your question, for me, 2023, as I've reflected on it, has a lot to do with humanity resolving. There's two strands, right? Or two roads. There's one road where we are consciously doing emotional healing work that we've been doing with Pluto and Capricorn. So a lot of people have been reparenting themselves emotionally, been learning to free themselves of a lot of internalized patterns that no longer represent the truth at this time that we're living in right now. So there's a lot of Pluto is exposing a lot of outdated structures internally within us, emotionally, psychologically, and obviously as a collective. So that process now, as Pluto is leaving as Capricorn, it's like a lingering experience. We're looking back at these experiences that we've transformed with us and saying, is there anything that still just needs to be looked at? And with Pluto at 29, it's like the core of those themes. It's not just the surface stuff that would have happened in 2015, as an example. A lot of people have been going through a lot of transformation emotionally within themselves, learning emotional intelligence. And this is like the final exam in my eyes. It's a process of looking at what you've learned and implementing these techniques, these healing practices that people have been going through, really looking at their inner psychology. Because Capricorn in one way is an archetype of self-mastery, so we're really, getting to implement a lot of the emotional work that we've been learning and being exposed to, and that has actually become more accessible to the collective as more people have gone on healing journeys, experienced something positive, and then said, I've got to share this with people. You know what I mean? And there's such a wide range of that. So 2023 to me is the year of looking at what is still there that needs to be processed through, so that when Pluto, is moving into Aquarius fully, people can experience that liberation that will take place, right? It's a new series of archetypes that we'll deal with. The other side that I was saying was that those that haven't been able to do that are still going to be haven't dealt with any of their trauma or any of their emotional work, this is going to be difficult. It's going to feel like the world is becoming more and more intense. And so those are the two kind of tracks that I see. And one will be a reinforcement of, oh my gosh, life is tough. And the other one will feel like a liberation from experiences that have kept people from feeling that they can self-actualize, right? Or they can follow their dreams, or they can feel free. Yeah. So that's how I kind of see 2023 and 2024 as especially 2023, it's a back and forth of looking what's, and then of course there's a lot of social change that will come on when the nodes change into Libra Aries.
Yes, in July 17th. Yeah, the nodes change. That really, because it kicks into from the fixed signs that they've been into cardinal. So things come online pretty darn fast in that dynamic. Yeah.
Yes.
And with the North Node in Aries, hey. And I believe in the ingress chart, Mars is out of bounds still.
Oh yeah, I saw that actually.
So it's actually quite dynamic.
So
I am very interested to kind of like, especially with the Saturn in Pisces kind of going in, into a new sign right before. And so that emotional intelligence, what's going on with that mastery of that Pisces is the feeling part of it. Can you feel what? I think that's a big thing about healing is like, why do I feel what I feel, and what is it that I'm feeling? And a lot of people don't really register that. They don't really understand that, and they get into crisis mode because they don't understand how to navigate or what's going on, and it's just kind of a react. So. Yeah, and trying to emerge into that. But I trust the soul finds its way a lot of the time. I should say a lot of the time. And so it's going to be, and I think with astrology and other esoteric arts that can help people navigate kind of that, because I think being able to, I just had a client yesterday. It's like, oh, you're going to be emerging through this with the Pluto in Aquarius and Saturn and Pisces, and how that's playing out in that dynamic. Like, you are individuating, you're definitely going there, you're tracking that way, but you're going to probably still have things that will put you into put you on a test for how you're going to respond to something, because of conditioned state, right? Like we approach things by the conditioned, and that's just the unconscious mind. But how when we pay attention to those things in our healing journey more and more, it's like, oh, that is something I have, that is kind of something I do in my behavior. And how why is that, kind of exploring the self and why, and diving in, and then because I when I dove into astrology, I took it through, like, my Pluto when I was born was in Virgo. I'm from that generation, and then as the Pluto moved into Libra, my parents also divorced, so that was a dynamic. And then the Pluto through the Scorpio, and what that presented in the family and the consciousness, of that experience. And then into Sagittarius, and what, how that expanded, and things around especially around markets and things like that, and the world and borders and all of these kinds of things. And then into Capricorn, and that we have like real solid kind of experience. We're still in it. We're not finished with Capricorn, but I think it's so valuable to have people have this available to understand. There's something to take a look at for yourself, so you can guide yourself, or move more towards what you're self-actualizing something. You're valuable in the whole. So I think that astrology gave me that. I know that when I went into my spiritual crisis, a decade, 13, 14 years ago, that's what it opened me up to that, because I was like, I can't understand all this life and its craziness, so I'm just going to go here. And when I went here, it went whoo, So so Pluto in Aquarius, back and forth into Capricorn. It's kind of that finishing, but also kind of pay attention, 29 degrees critical degree, experiencing that again and again, kind of.
And what I noticed was that, it was kind of interesting in a presentation I did. It was like, Pluto is tricking us. We get this nice little bump that Pluto comes into Aquarius, and we start feeling the Aquarius vibes in our consciousness. We start opening up to things like AI and all of this, right? Very different ways of looking at reality, understanding time in a different way. And then what I see is that as Pluto retrogrades back into Aquarius, it goes, not yet. Like, we're not done yet. Like, come back. You can't go that far yet. You're not ready.
Exactly. You're not ready. You have a few more things that you need
Yes,
you have an exam over here. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. It's like you're not finished school yet. You don't have that, you,
Yes, yes,
and then it's
yes.
very
And it's
Capricorn in nature as well, right? You're not ready yet,
mhm,
but I am.
mhm. Yeah. The maturity. No, you have to a little bit more discipline on this or that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and framing it up because I think I'm an avid I gather a lot of information. I'm an information gatherer. I think that's just
Hmm.
part of. I have Mercury out of bounds in Capricorn on my midheaven. At
Okay.
I think my Mercury is at 14 degrees Capricorn. Yeah, 1401 or something, and my midheaven is 1105. So
Okay.
I have Uranus at 8 degrees of Libra, so it squares my Mercury and my midheaven. So I get this kind of drop in sometimes. So I can be the disruptor and can
Sure.
be the I'm going to come in like that, right? Or something's going to come in that I'm bringing in as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And I get it when I'm in conversation, oftentimes with clients. It's like, okay, here it comes. So I record the stuff because it will just come in and okay, whatever was that? you know? So I can get it like that sometimes, but I also am very acutely aware, and I think this is kind of this awareness on uh, dimensional experience, I think, and maybe Pluto's going to accelerate this because Pluto will. I have Moon Saturn in Taurus at 1 and 2 degrees conjunct, and then I have Jupiter at 0 degrees 22 minutes of Scorpio. So this Pluto
Sure.
ingress will square and give the T, kind of that T square thing. Um, so for me, I'm very curious, but it will amp up kind of that Uranian Libra for me. So that
Okay.
comes in from relationship kind of awareness when I'm talking with people. So relationships kind of give me that feedback. So it's very important. But what I find in clients already happening, it's almost like I get a precursor to something before it comes in because I'm noticing that when I'm talking with a client, I'm getting awareness of like more than it's like the thought patterns are bigger and it's like, oh, this is what they're kind of like leaning towards or but I'm also in partnership to this thing and I'm getting the feedback loop for myself to this thing.
Yes.
So every single relationship and every moment that I'm kind of like really focused on the conscious awareness of this thing because I'm like, wow, there's so much energy here. There's so much in this thought and then
Yeah.
something will come in and it'll weave in like that. And I am fascinated by this because it's like, wow, it's accelerating things that it comes in like a whole big thought pattern. I feel that makes any sense whatsoever. But I'm experiencing this already, but I think it's preparing me because I'm over the last maybe 3 months or so that I usually get things a little bit early because all the water in my sign
Sure.
are in my chart. But I don't have a lot of air in my chart. Um, I only have Uranus and air in all of my charts. It's kind of interesting. Yet I have this huge amount of interest to absorb information so
Yeah.
then I can have dialogue with it.
Sure.
So, in this kind of like experience of being aware in relationship, because the relationship is such a key thing for how you present your astrology a lot of the time about how people are in relationship with something.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how like the Pluto and Aquarius. I mean, I'm having a unique experience, but it's not quite in there yet. So I'm like, yeah, there's still some more that I'm
Sure.
totally not aware of, but it's kind of showing me a little bit before we get there.
Yeah.
I'm curious if like, have you experienced anything that you feel is kind of emerging because being prepared to a point, or is we just don't know until it's absolutely in the sign and then we get kind of a taste and then back and forth and that kind of thing. And I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah. It's a good question. I was actually asked that by somebody I work with, and I hadn't thought about it a lot until when he asked the question. And so here's what I think about that. I think that in my experience of tracking transits and noticing what types of effects take place is I see it the same way that water on the beach from the ocean like comes onto the beach, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the water will come onto the beach like that, and then it will recede. I see that the energy as Pluto comes closer to a sign or any planet comes closer to a sign, it will start to kind of like bleed into our consciousness, and we'll start to pick up on the patterns, and then it will retrograde back like that, right? And
Mhm.
when Pluto retrogrades back, then kind of recedes from what's salient, what's real for us in the moment, and we may
Mm.
those patterns will linger within our consciousness. And what I think will occur is that as Pluto comes closer to Aquarius, which it's obviously at 29 now, it's very apparent that there are some really strange things we're processing in the collective, like UFOs,
Mhm.
artificial intelligence, other
Mhm.
forms of Aquarian themes are becoming present, but they will become, in my eyes, like a little bit distant as the year goes on, and there'll be more of, oh, that's what was there, and we'll go back to more Capricorn themes. Um, and
Mm.
what I
Mhm.
think will also what also naturally takes place as these planetary systems move closer to a sign and ingress, uh, we'll have some things that will pop up for us, and we'll get a
Mhm.
taste of it, like you were talking about.
Mhm.
Um, and then we'll kind of interact with those themes again. So we'll still kind of stick with the UFO thing, or you know, um, artificial intelligence, but we'll see it from a different perspective, and we might like have some new thoughts and ideas come up. The collective will be processing these themes
Right.
um, from a different perspective, and then Pluto will come back
Mhm.
to Aquarius again, and we'll be like, "Whoa, this is really here, and we're dealing with this," and we'll interact with it
Mhm.
differently. And I think that's how that ebb and flow works until eventually it goes into Aquarius, and the energy
Mhm.
becomes consistent, right? It
Mhm.
becomes persistent. It's like, okay, this is what we're dealing with, and it's not going away.
Mhm.
Um, and that's
So
so the last piece
yeah.
is, I think once the planet enters the sign, we get a really good, consistent, salient kind of like, okay, this is what we're dealing with. Whereas before, I don't think that we actually fully, it doesn't grab our attention in a way that's consistent. It's there, we're
Mm.
going like, what, this is cool. And then we recede back into previous patterns of processing, like in this case, Pluto through Capricorn will become
Right.
more and more evident, right?
Right. Kind of understanding that what's in our structure, our systems that we need to like pay attention to a little
Yes,
even more
yes,
so because we have it. Yeah, that's to me like just reading news, and I only skim because I only have so much time to I don't go into depth on some of them, but like the recent like I think it was Microsoft's Bing AI
yes,
and making the error. And I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? I used to work at Microsoft many years ago. So it's kind of interesting that's like, oh, that's already emerging. And we're not even into the
yes.
Aquarius yet. It's showing the flaw in the system and they're having to address it
Restructure it,
already,
exactly.
restructure it. So, and then um, I've been trying to catch up on Chat GPT, if I can say that
Yeah.
correctly. There's so much there that, and I haven't even dove into it. Have you touched into that at all? With played with it at all? I have not
Yeah, I'm,
yet.
I'm pretty much in love with ChatGPT, as well as another program called Tome, and that which helps me kind of create stories. And yeah, so, and I'm learning how to
Nice,
do prompt engineering, which kind of a little side thing that's fun. And I
awesome.
completely see it as
Nice.
Aquarius thing, and I'll talk about that at some point. But yeah,
Yeah. No. Okay. Cool. No. That's my inquisitive mind. I'm very curious. Like, what's that? What's that? I watch a lot of I watch YouTube videos to educate myself on a lot of things. So that's where
sure.
I go to like, okay, what's going on here? What's going on here? But there are so many pieces. I mean, and then some TikToks that come in every now
Yeah,
and then that are like, oh, that's curious. Okay, I want to go check out that. But there's only so much time in the day, and I have a day job too. So, but I know that's going to be emerging more. So it's like the AI, how we are in relationship to the technology that's in our life. That's a very strong Pluto Aquarius kind of
yeah,
thing. But it's also how we think about it collectively. Because I think as we merge in, I also look at movies. I love movies. I have the Pisces Mars, and I have Neptune in Capricorn, not Capricorn, excuse me, Neptune in Scorpio at 29 degrees. So it's where's my Mars?
yeah,
But I'm a Sag Sun. I love the movies, the adventure of the movies, and that kind of experience. But in the movies, I was kind of like spanning through like what's kind of some emerging movies and how artificial intelligence is so much in these themes of these movies, and like wow, there's so many that are coming,
yeah.
and also the shadow experience of the Pluto, the fear of that, right? Like it's
Sure.
woven into some of these as well. What do you think the collective may um how it might flow with that kind of emerging, because there's always kind of like, here's the thing that you fear
Sure.
and when it emerges, right, especially with Pluto involved. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you're asking me some of the coolest questions in the world, from my point of view, at least. I can sit and share lots about that. I would start off by saying that, just before I forget, I want to introduce also that part of the Aquarius for me is also how humanity will come back to nature as a natural response to an oversaturation of technology. So I think that part of the Aquarius age also is a conscious recognition that we have a bioform, and that in some way, shape, or form, we're learning how to nurture it based on the Pisces age, where a large part of our consciousness was a disassociation from it, right? And that can be represented as kind of the fall of the feminine, and the way that patriarchal ideals came in and needed to suppress the feminine structure or the body as a way to avoid chaos, right? So I think that Pluto and Capricorn helped us as a collective, in one part, deal with chaos. I mean, 2020, 2021 was a prime example of what that's like. But then there's been also many experiences over the last 10 years where our safety in society is just, it's just top tier. So those that have managed to consciously become comfortable with chaos as a natural product of what it means to be human, and I think will be capable of integrating the feminine principle into themselves and realizing that emotions are unpredictable. They can feel chaotic at times, but if we know how to regulate them, we have tools. We don't have to be afraid of them. And when we don't have to feel afraid of them, we have a lot more power in the ability to understand, regulate, and see what they're teaching us. And I think there's a kind of binary that would take place again between a lot of people who struggle to navigate their inner emotional world due to trauma, due to complexity of life, and might have sudden eruptions where their experiences will lead them to healing. And that's where a lot of people like myself and you will come in. Many people who have had like awakenings that kind of almost feel as if you're like, this happened way too fast, and why did this happen? And then you're here and you're like, okay, I can actually help people go through an awakening experience. So that being said, I think that returning to nature, returning to natural clean energy or natural clean ways of living will become more and more evident. And that's a lot to do with the Pluto and Sagittarius, because they've got Uranus and Neptune in Aquarius, right? So that's also going to be activated. And the shadow part of it, I like to watch films too. And I was just saying to my partner the other day, I noticed how in 2007 and 2006 and 2005, you saw all of the Pluto and Scorpios, where it was like the vampires and the werewolves and the love stories and this intense emotions and Transformers and all of that. And then you kind of, you see the Pluto and Sag just come online and everything's about AI, or it's about like outer space, or there's a whole cool series of TV shows on Amazon Prime that kind of really illustrate our, we're tapping into something that's more sci-fi oriented,
Right.
You can see that there. And the fear piece, this is the piece that I want to kind of just finish off with, is there's two things. The internet is an acceleration tool for humanity in the sense that it's singularity. And what I mean by this is that if you are on Facebook and you're interacting with the stream, like on Facebook, and you're noticing yourself getting emotionally charged, it's mirroring back to you your own limbic system being hijacked, right? That's what I mean. The internet is a mirror for collective consciousness, and it reveals everything about us. You just, again, look at 2020 and 2021. You can see how the shadow in humanity is very present with us, right? How we, in a crisis, how we struggled to handle our fears. Okay, so that was a big deal. Like that showed us the depths of where we're at and how we can handle these things. So I think when Pluto enters Aquarius and we address the shadow complexes within our psyche, there are three titles that I think are very prominent. One is othering. So it's like, my community is better than yours. My perception of reality is better than yours as an example, or you don't this, and you'll have this kind of really interesting thing of people struggling to integrate individuality because they themselves feel that their individuality is being threatened by other people's perspectives. I think we'll struggle with that, right? We'll struggle with my perspective is better than yours as an example. At the same time, there is also something that I think will be really real for us, which is how do we deal with a world where the needs of the individual conflict with the needs of society? So what I mean by this is that, like, for an example, climate change is a big deal to a lot of people, but in order for everybody to be on board with it, everybody needs to in some way agree to the same thing. Which, if you see the world, or if you just go into a room with 10 people and you ask them to agree with humanity on something that seems pretty obvious or pretty simple to process, that's a difficult thing. So I think Pluto and Aquarius will reveal to us that in terms of our humanity, it will be very difficult for us to kind of belong to one shared ideal. And it's going to be interesting to see how that will reflect on our own internal parts of ourselves that struggle to experience or embrace Aquarius themes, which is kind of the humanity. And the last thing that I'll say here, and then I'll kind of hand the baton back to you, is that if you look at a lot of Aquarius themes, there's always one dynamic where there's the brotherhood. So a great TV series I encourage you to watch is called His Darker Materials. It's a 3-season series where it addresses kind of all these cool little themes, and in there you'll see some astrology show up. But there's a very clear Aquarius theme in there, which there is a brotherhood. I mean, even Ready Player One, the movie Ready Player One, there's an organization, right, that wants to dominate humanity, and this is the ideal. And you can see that everybody's uniformed. There's no individuality there, and people. So that there's in Aquarius, part of the shadow is a very strong oppressive Saturnian dynamic that then creates the kind of matrix complex where now you have the resistance, right? There's a polarity. People want to be free, and so they are part of the resistance. And so you have this binary between those that are oppressors and those that are resistance fighters. And that's still a polarization of a fractured Aquarius energy. So I know that's pretty kind of deep in that sense, but that's what I see that we'll kind of address with is which side of that spectrum do we naturally fall on, and if we can recognize where we're not siding with both sides, because each side is reflecting a shadow side of Aquarius. One is this person's imposing limitations on me and I need total freedom, I'm going to rebel just at whatever. And the other one is I can't handle individuality, and so therefore there must be one unified truth that everybody abide by and be a subscription to, in that sense.
Right. Yeah. It's so complex, right?
Yes.
Because it's the ability to hold that both coexist and can coexist, but it's so polarized right now that it's like no, you can't exist. It's that dynamic that we're not quite where you. But humanity has a way of going through a crisis, and then it can get can it get nasty, and it can get warring, and play out that way, and then it settles down. I have been following there's a book called The Fourth Turning. Tony Robbins was talking to the gentleman who co-wrote that, Hal or something, in a video recently, and where we are on the cusp of that now, where we're kind of like going through another period of massive transition. And I was like, it's so interesting because they don't talk about astrology at all in that, right? But it's thematically goes with I think it was Gary P. Caton, the astrologer, who had shared that video on, I think it was Facebook or something, and then I watched it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is totally talking about the Uranus cycle of 84 years and what goes on in that. And it was so interesting because of how things are kind of like, oh, it's right there. It's so parallel to the fact of these cycles that we have in astrology. But in the United States, for example, and different parts of Europe and things like that, because of how our relationship as we emerged as a nation, because we are still in the Pluto return
Return,
period
yeah.
time for the US, as it's at the end of Capricorn. But I think even in the early degrees of Aquarius for Pluto, that was the emerging of the United States. So we're going to go through all that, and I have another episode of that coming later with another astrologer about that whole emergence and how we might want to take a look at that.
Yeah.
But from a collective standpoint, but I think in terms of how we're navigating kind of this cuspy, in between the Capricorn and going into the Pluto back and forth, it's going to be interesting to, how, what does emerge for some folks in crisis, like what, and how astrology may help where something else may not anymore. It may feel organized religion. If someone turns there and it's still not helping them, maybe they will explore something. Maybe that opens up a window. Just by, hey, they have a friend and they introduce it to, those kinds of things that help people kind of make that bridge. That's emerging, I think, as well. And I love how you added in your thought there about as Pluto in Aquarius, over the next 20 years, how we connect more back into the natural world and you call it the biome. I love that. To return to I'm a gardener too. I'm a heavy gardener because I love that. And yet I'm also in the tech world. I'm a tech recruiter by day, astrologer, all the other times, and then a gardener during the season. So, but it's so important for my health. If I don't have my feet in the dirt or my hands in the dirt during a good part of the year, I don't feel like I'm grounded.
No.
And and I grow a lot of flowers sometimes, but I grow some veggies too. But I think it's important just to be connected to and help the insects and the bees and all the things.
Yes.
So I think that was very interesting. I never thought about that because it does square from the Aquarius to the Taurus, or
Yes.
the Taurus, even Taurus Scorpio kind of thing. So that's going to be interesting to see how that folds in over this period of time and how our relationship is between the tech that we have and how we use the technology to improve,
Yes.
everything in that. Farming can gain a lot of, how can we improve the fields, or how can we improve, what we're doing with our crops without having to coat it with. I mean, I try to support farmers markets and the organic community and all of those things because those are important to me. I'm like, I want those to be around when I'm 100, or whatever. If I live to 100, but let's see. No, those kinds of things are very interesting that you would point out as well in this. What was the name of that show? You said
His Dark Materials.
His Dark Materials?
Yep, that's right.
That sounds very interesting. I want to explore that too.
I would even go as far as to say that for any of your viewers that have watched it, season 3 is a really good example of Pluto entering Aquarius. And it's season 3 definitely touches on the themes that I think will be very real and relevant. And there's even the end of the story between the two characters is wildly Aquarius. I mean, it's
oh, that's exciting. I can't wait to check that one out. So is that on what platform?
In Sweden here it's called HBO Max. I don't know if that's
we have HBO Max here too.
Okay,
so
cool,
that would be the platform that it would be available on. Okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can get that through Amazon as well. Not that I'm an ad for here, but I like to know where to find it. Awesome.
So if it was okay, I just wanted to add 2 things quickly. There is another TV show, talking about TV shows and stuff. There's one TV show that I think it's called This Is Us. It's a 6-season.
I've heard of that.
TV show called This Is Us. And I wanted to say that TV show creatively nailed the Aquarius archetype in ways that I feel is probably the most organic expression of Aquarius that I've seen. And that's a statement. Like, I'm saying that out loud. Like, that show captures the Aquarius archetype in its best form, because it holds 3 things. It holds the capacity for reflection based on past events. It shows how past events interact future events and how that threading works. And it also shows that Aquarius, at its core, when we talk about humanity, is our ability to be at peace with each other, understanding our differences, so that, you know, we're all going through unique experiences within ourselves, and how do we hold space within ourselves to see each of our journeys as something that's unique, that cannot be rejected, or that should be dismissed, or that is wrong because this is it. It's Aquarius is about individual time, and we're shifting from a universal time that everybody just follows the same clock to, hey, you know, I'm in Sweden, you're in the States, we're meeting at this time, and our moments are colliding for some shared experience, but then at some point we'll go off like that, right? And whereas kind of conforming to something. And I think 2023 will initiate a deep depression in people where they feel that they're still stuck in the past. And the depression will lead to two things. It will lead to a realization that this is not what life's about, which will then open them up to new experiences or new possibilities or breaking out of the mold. Or two, that the depression will stay with people in a way that will actually just become unbearable. And I'm being like honest here, in the sense that
That's fair.
the nth degree and the initiation of Aquarius is meant, the reason why it's liberation is because something is to be held. So it's not just a random words, right? It's an actual experience of feeling stuck. And if you think about like kind of inflation at the moment, you think about world dynamics that are taking place, a lot of people feel that possibilities and potentials are dwindling because, you know, the world seems like it's becoming darker, and in a way it will with Venus retrograde. But everything is born out of the seed, right? That comes from the darkness. And so you've gone through that experience. I've gone through that experience where we felt stuck. This was empty, and then it proceeded. It pushed us to go and find something real and authentic in our lives. And this is the manifestation of it, right? And that's what people, I think, will go through. It's a collective awakening now, not just an individual sporadic thing all over the world where, you know, we start to go, hey, are you having these weird experiences? Yes. Okay, I'm not crazy. Yeah, okay, fine. And then, you know.
That's true. You think you're going crazy sometimes. And, you know, I think that depending on your trauma and how much you should get help. But I think I found that I had dreams that were a whole year before mine, and Neptune was arcing to my midheaven, and it was going to, which is Capricorn. So the Neptune coming out of, you know, Scorpio to that, it was really going to show me something. But I was ready, because I was like, and I at the time, the motto I had that I was sharing all the time was like, I gotta bust out of this bubble, because I just have to, right? Like I must emerge. And so I had no idea what I was stepping into, though, because I literally had some amazing experience. I mean, just blew my mind. It's like, oh, reality is so incredible. Time is so fluid, really.
Yes.
And how it will feed back on it. But there's an imperative of reflection. So I'm a huge champion for journaling, because I have stacks and stacks of journal that I did in my younger years that and, you know, off and on. I wasn't like always consistent, but sometimes I was solid, you know, filled the books. But because I had those journals, I was able to go back to help myself heal. But it also showed me how amazing what was emerging for me. Is like, I can't even explain this to people.
No.
The only thing I can do is like, I'm aware of it. How do I even explain this? Because I started writing a book because it's like, was so amazing. But it was really like what was happening, what the universe was like showing me in like synchronicities before I opened up. And it's like, here you are, here you are, here you are. And then I had a vision, and that was my first episode. I kind of talk about like what led up to that vision. And then it just broke open, and then it was the dark night of the soul. It's like, okay, here you go. Because it had the high, and then it had to go into the trough to kind of, you got to go retrieve some things, honey. So it's like, oh yeah, all the things. And I got lots of therapy. I got acupuncture at that time. Astrology emerged from dream and from a Reiki session. Like I was looking over a golden book. Like, what is that? And 6 months later, I was looking over the astrology, my very first astrology book, and it was like, boom. So I was like, oh, this is the place. This is where I'm supposed to be. So yeah, so people will emerge into things like that. They can have experiences that have synchronicities
Yeah.
and they'll be like, what is this? What is going
Yeah.
on? But when it starts speeding up, it's like, okay, you're in that place, right? When things are, and people are like, yeah, I see numbers. I'm like, oh yeah. all the things. It'll be like weird and yeah, but what I love about is like it pulls you in. And astrology, because I had numerology at first that I was playing with, and it was just
Sure.
like I was starting to see patterns and everything, and it's like, and my friends are like, "Are you okay?" Yes, I'm seeing things that I can't explain to you. And then astrology, but astrology was more, way more specific and opening and symbolic that of the actual process of self individuation, but also that had the reflective that I needed to kind of see, oh, okay, I emerged through all these things to this point,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so I needed that, and it also, you kind of go into the whole, well, did I set all this stuff up, or what's the before Sarrah, kind of stuff that brought in this stuff, right? And so it does play in your. And I sat on the fence for like, I'm not kidding you, for 2 years. Like, is it fate or is it free will or is it a combo?
Sure.
Is it a box of chocolates? Like, I love movies, so I refer things back to movies all the time. So yeah, that was what it was like. So I think it's important people to understand. I guess that's what's emerging in this podcast is like, if you're listening to this and you find this and you find that you may be emerging into this, it's like, pay attention. And
Yeah.
astrology can help you. And I think evolutionary astrology can help you even more than just your Western or even Hellenistic. Hellenistic gives you kind of the Saturnian viewpoint, like,
Mm.
this is what's going on. I think it's valuable because I'm also trained with Demeter George in the traditional sense.
Cool.
It's valuable in its own right for what it offers and some techniques. But evolutionary astrology, I think, frees people. It frees the soul to understand that it's in an evolutionary cycle of some,
Yeah.
sorts, and that you are emerging and that you are individuating. There is a
Yes.
process, and I think that's beautiful. So to add on to this, we have a lot of potential changes going on with the humans, and like physical, mental, emotional,
Yeah.
spiritual. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
I mean, firstly, the brain's actual chemical structure is being changed as we interface with more and more tech. I think that things like autism, ADHD, neurodivergent, these types of communities are becoming more stronger in adopting beliefs and understandings that these are not actually negative things. Like I do see autism from my perspective as a product of the mutation in our human consciousness into Aquarius age energy, because Aquarius age is completely transparent. There's no like, that's why I think the fear with tech for a lot of people is, dealing with being exposed. Like a Pluto and Scorpio generation are the ones that came out and said, Jesus, these people have my data. And you working in these places like where, data collection, right? All of a sudden, your identity is not just your physical form and your ID card, it becomes your entire process on the internet. There's an entire different digital identity that exists. And, that's accessible, and you've kind of learned this. So Aquarius with transparency is something where it's a natural square to Scorpio. It's complete detached. It's looking at things from such a detached, objective perspective that you need to see all sides of it, right? And if you interact with people who have autism and are on spectrums of that, they have a very difficult ability to pretend, right? So their emotional, intellectual dynamic is not like, is this the social cue? Is this how to do it? It's like, if you say to them, hey, I'm going to the store, they'll be like, okay, cool. But to me, it'll be like, I'm telling this person because maybe they'll do this. They don't see, their brain is not tuned in that way. So there's this really interesting kind of thing that I'm following around how the structure of dopamine is changing, and how people that suffer from, that's not even the wrong word, like people that experience ADHD are actually more equipped for the Aquarius age than people that are not, because of the fact that Aquarius is so multidimensional that you just
Mm-hmm.
talk to the founder of Ethereum and you listen to him talk for 5 minutes, and it's like this guy's brain's processing so fast that I just can't even understand it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that our brains naturally need to go through some form of evolutionary change that allows us
Mm-hmm.
to be able to to be equipped to process that age.
Right.
um,
Right.
but we are not that. So you see a lot of kind of
Yeah.
adaptations taking place where,
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying to wrestle with that. We're trying to accept individuality in this way, right? We're trying to learn how to go,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually not a disorder, it's like this, or, that's, and you can
Right.
see it in the States right now that there's, you guys are processing a lot individuality. Is this person a woman? Is this person male? Like, is that the words we're
Mm-hmm.
going to use, etc.? And through Capricorn, it's very kind of defined, like it must be
Mm-hmm.
defined. Whereas in Aquarius, it's more just, hey, this is who I am, and this is how I interact,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm more than that. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you talked about earlier, right? There's a story that becomes, you become more conscious of your like unconscious memory. I think that's what we're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing, and I think Aquarius
Mm-hmm.
will accelerate our biology and our DNA to be able to understand more of our multidimensionality.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that process is something that we're experiencing right now. Like, just that's why I think EA and other forms of tools that embrace the soul as a perspective are hugely beneficial for where we're at and what we're ready to process as a collective, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This is so interesting how you kind of language that, because just for I can only understand things from my own
sure.
experience with it, right? And um how long it takes me to integrate something. This is so critical, like,
Yeah.
because I'll go, and this, in other perspectives, I guess, when we look at people's experience and their repeating patterns, right? They're repeating patterns, repeating patterns, repeating patterns. But I I will take in so much information before I can actually land that I'm going to act on it, and that's I think that's the Aries part, and that it will register that now then I have to do the thing to integrate the thing. That's like becoming an astrologer was important for me to actually truly integrate the astrology fully into
Yes.
my consciousness all the way, right? And then but then what's interesting about my personal experience with it is that I've been integrating this for about 13 years. It's almost to 14 years. So I'm almost at a half Saturn cycle, right? So I know this because there are points where I'm like, oh, I can see the Saturn settling into how I experience it. It's so interesting. And then also, how the fluidity between, because I know in a lot of spiritual or esoteric wisdom is the moment now, the power in the moment now, and how you're in flow, right? And some tech insights on this is how you can be in flow all the
Sure.
higher and longer and all this stuff. They're kind of like getting into that, right? So to me, it's like understanding, if you have an understanding of your chart, how you may get into there, or how long it takes you to integrate something, assimilate in the information that you've acquired, because we are assimilating so much
Yes.
information right now. And I think it's so interesting that you point that out about the body and how we physically have to change to upgrade to this kind of.
Yeah.
And those who have, I think, more air might have a little bit easier job. I
That's
don't know.
right.
I get the burst because I do have the one air coming that way through to my Mercury, and my Mercury is out of bounds, so it kind of operates beyond the sun. So
Yeah.
I can randomize things, but I also have a bit of a chaos of my own environment because of that. So I have a little
Yeah.
bit of messy office, but the rest of my house is very nice. So but it's how you integrate it, because it's like the volume. I need the volume to. It's almost like that movie, The Matrix, where they were like, download it now, So,
Yep.
and I'm like, yeah, I kind of do that. We go through, and even in the process of maybe in a reading, or like, oh, that was a download, and here, okay, there it is, boom. You know what I mean? I think we're definitely tracking information, volumes of data, so much, and that we are physically changing as a
Yes.
part of this. But what does
Yes.
that look like in 50 years? What does that look like in 100 years? I'm fascinated by this thing, right?
I mean,
So,
that's a really good question. I thought about that a lot. Like, I mean, I don't know the entirety of the answer, but one thing that I think is true is that uh, the it's like our exposure to the current version of how we process data at the moment will accelerate, and we will learn to adapt in that sense. But I don't know if we have the capacity to fully comprehend the Aquarius speed. I think that the reason why I'm saying this is that unless, like, we can tap into some really deep intuitive spaces, and we can kind of download information pretty fast. And I think that's what podcasts are really about, is how we're the stream of consciousness in the Aquarius process, and we can kind of just be in that flow. But this is kind of a weird thing, because it bleeds into some esoteric teachings and circles that I feel are very Pisces age orientated. But there's a book written by somebody called Jamie Wheel and a partner, and it's called Stealing Fire. And it's basically a book where, have you read it by any chance?
I've heard of it.
Okay, so just a preface for those that haven't, it's a observation of how consciousness at different points within people can sync up to a unified field that will then be able to download a large, greater ability to understand the reality. In other words, I think that what will occur for us is that we will be forced to learn to collaborate, where our unique perspectives or unique ways of processing data allows us to enhance our capacity for solution making. Because the way that the world is at right now, not me nor you can answer the big questions about how the world is. Like, it's too big. And so learning how to be with right groups of people that you gel with, that you can really kind of have a spark with, and you feel an experience of Aquarius Leo polarity of like, wow, this person really gets me, I get them, here's where I've got some good qualities, here's the good qualities, when we make a good team, right? And like, how do we experience higher states or deeper states of consciousness and reality when we bind ourselves to people who have such that we can merge with, and the capacity for our brains and our nervous systems to tune into that. And then we think about things in completely different ways. Like we're a quantum computer almost, where we're processing data, and we require that to be able to solve things. Whereas I don't know if we can do that individually anymore. It's just, I don't think our biology is ready for that. That we're advancing in that sense, and our neuroplasticity is consistently changing. But from what I've seen, you need to be on top of that. You need to be like, okay, I'm cleaning my body consistently, right? I'm not kind of like using lots of alcohol, for instance, or I'm not, putting things in it that could be disrupting that. You're like, and that's why you'll see there's a tremendous movement in health at the moment with the Pluto and Scorpios bringing that polarity point of Taurus in, with Uranus and Taurus at the moment, right? Interesting to me that Uranus will be in Taurus when Pluto enters Aquarius. Like there's you can see that what you talked about earlier about Taurus and Aquarius being the squares. So it tells me a lot about that. It tells me a lot about how the Aquarius age also is about cleaning the body so that it's capable of then processing finer tuned states of information, right? That we can tap into these more broader scopes of reality. And I think the last thing that I want to say is, I don't know how to conceptualize it because it's still fresh in my head, but I'll probably speak more from inspiration. But there's this really, really cool conversation with a character called Eric Weinstein. Unfortunately, it depends on how you stand. The podcast is happening on with Joe Rogan, but Eric is a mathematician slash physicist, but he's not a physicist per se. And he was talking about how our science at the moment, especially in institutions, are afraid to go into quantum models of reality as a way to prove time differently than Einstein's theory of relativity. And he was expressing both his grief that we are not even answering these cool Uranian questions. There's Pluto and Virgo with that Pluto Uranus conjunction. So he wants to radicalize things, right? He wants to change stuff, but he's consistently hitting the old god. And he was talking about how, and this is somebody that doesn't do any astrology or anything of the sort, right? If you address it to him,
it's just they're on what their topic are. We know the archetype, right? They're talking about it. Yeah.
And I was listening to him talk about this, like, yes, I mean, I've had goosebumps because I was like, oh, he's tapping into time, and he's going, dude, we don't even understand time outside of the way that the model is. And because we're not doing that, we're not even playing with reality yet. And I was like, yes, that's what Aquarius is going to do. Like, these people that are on it, that are in tune with that Aquarius energy, they're just going to tap into that stuff, and we're going to see some really, really cool things come out, within the next kind of like month, or like years. So
over the 20 years for sure, as it gets deeper into it for
yeah.
sure. This has been an awesome conversation, and I definitely want to have you back. I really vibe with you, and I love the exchange that we go through, sharing. And I have so many things I have to write down from this podcast just that you shared with me that I have to go watch now, because I'm fascinated by all those things. So I want to leave people with where they can find you, and if you've got any things going on coming up.
Sure.
Do you want to share that?
Absolutely. So the main place that you can find me is my YouTube channel, which if you just type in Raising Vibrations, so Raising and Vibrations and then Simon, you'll see my content will come up. That's primarily where I connect with people. And then through there, you'll learn about the different things that I do. At the moment, my primary work is 3 months of deep intensive transformation, where the goal is to spend time really working on the soul's journey so that it prepares you for the Aquarius age. So that's the type of work that I do. And then for anybody that's wanting to become a professional astrologer, I also have a mentorship program that essentially helps people get into the position that me and you are in. And it's also about teaching EA there. So those are the things that I'm doing at the moment, which is pretty awesome. And then YouTube.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciated your time today. You will be able to access this podcast probably within a few days. It's going to take about 4 or 5 days in post-production. Sure. So everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the One Sage's View podcast. I'm Sarrah Christensen, your host. You can find me at onesagesview.com, at Instagram, Facebook, and also YouTube channel, One Sage's View. And the podcast is also available on Spotify as well as the YouTube channel. So in the description on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to have some of the information that Simon has shared. I will put that in the description. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your month, and look forward to seeing you online. Take care.